Subscribe now to never miss the most thrilling mafia romance stories on our channel. It was an ordinary Friday afternoon when Lily, the girl next door with an innocent smile and a curiosity that often got her into trouble, found herself standing nervously in front of a massive black door she had only ever admired from a distance. She had come for something as simple as sugar, imagining a quick hello and a polite exchange, yet the moment her knuckles knocked lightly against the polished wood, she had no idea her life was about to change forever. The door opened slowly, revealing a man whose presence seemed to command the very air around him. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with dark eyes that seemed to pierce straight through her, as if he could see every secret, every fear, and every desire she had ever tried to hide. He looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and amusement, his expression calm but undeniably magnetic. Lily's words caught in her throat as she stammered out her request. I was wondering if you could spare some sugar. The mafia boss before her, known in whispers throughout the city as Damian Moretti, smiled faintly, a slow, controlled smile that hinted at danger and desire all at once. Sugar? He asked, his deep voice smooth like velvet, yet carrying an edge that sent a shiver down her spine. Lily nodded, holding out her small hand, and in that moment, she realized she had walked into a world far beyond her quiet suburban life, a world filled with power, wealth, and shadows she had only seen from afar. Damian stepped aside, allowing her to enter, and as she crossed the threshold, the faint scent of expensive cologne mixed with the subtle undertone of danger enveloped her, making her pulse race in a way she had never felt before. She had no idea that this simple knock on the mafia boss's door would be the start of a story that would consume her heart and test her every instinct. Inside, the mansion was a blend of elegance and intimidation, each corner adorned with art, dark wood, and the faint gleam of gold accents that whispered wealth and influence. Damian moved with the confidence of a man who owned not just the room but every room he ever stepped into, and Lily couldn't help but notice the sharp contrast between his commanding presence and the warmth that flickered in his eyes whenever he looked at her. They walked to the kitchen, where Damian retrieved a small container of sugar, handing it to her with a hand that was surprisingly gentle despite its size and strength. Lily felt an inexplicable flutter in her chest, a mixture of fear, attraction, and curiosity she had never experienced before. Thank you, she whispered, clutching the sugar as if it were a lifeline, unaware that the moment had already bound her fate to the man before her. Damian's gaze lingered on her longer than necessary, his mind calculating, analyzing every small movement, every nervous twitch, every heartbeat that he seemed to feel from across the room. He had dealt with many people in his life, people who were ambitious, deceitful, and dangerous, but Lily was different. There was a purity, a bold innocence, that intrigued him, and in a world built on manipulation and power, that was rare. You live nearby? He asked casually, though his tone suggested that he already knew the answer. Lily nodded, finding herself drawn to his presence despite the warning bells ringing in her mind. Yes, just next door. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken words, before Damian spoke again, his voice lowering to a level that made her ears tingle. Next door, yet you dared to knock. That takes courage, or perhaps foolishness. Lily swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond, but the tension in the room was strangely electrifying. She had always thought of him as untouchable, a figure in stories and whispers, but now he was here, observing her as if she were a puzzle he was eager to solve. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows, casting soft shadows that danced across the floor, highlighting every detail of Damian's sharp features, the slight curl of his lips, and the intensity in his eyes that seemed to hold a promise she didn't fully understand yet. She couldn't explain why, but a part of her wanted to stay longer, to linger in the presence of this enigmatic man who had somehow managed to unsettle and captivate her with a single glance. Sit, Damian commanded softly, and she obeyed, settling into a chair that felt suddenly too small for the weight of anticipation in the room. He leaned against the counter, watching her carefully, as if gauging her reaction to his every movement. Lily felt exposed yet strangely safe, caught in a web of curiosity and attraction that she couldn't resist. They spoke briefly, exchanging words about trivial matters, weather, neighbors, mundane life, but beneath each word, there was an undercurrent of tension, a silent dance that both thrilled and terrified her. With each passing minute, Damien found himself more drawn to her, to the way she laughed nervously, the way her eyes darted around the room, and the subtle courage it took for her to stand there, so close to a man whose reputation alone could intimidate anyone. Hours passed unnoticed as they spoke, the sugar long forgotten on the counter, until Lily finally realized she needed to leave. She stood, clutching the sugar, but Damien's hand gently touched her arm, stopping her. "You shouldn't leave just yet," he said, his tone soft but firm. Her heart raced, a mixture of fear and excitement coursing through her veins. I should go," she whispered, unsure why she felt compelled to stay. Damien stepped closer, reducing the distance between them, his presence overwhelming and intoxicating. "You came here for sugar," he murmured, almost teasingly, "but perhaps what you really needed was to find this, a moment you didn't know you were missing." Lily's breath caught in her throat. She didn't understand the words fully, but she felt the weight of them, the promise of something far more significant than a simple neighborly exchange. And in that moment, she realized that her life had changed forever. That knock on the door was no longer about sugar, it was about a connection, a pull, a force that neither of them could deny. The world outside, the quiet suburban streets, the mundane concerns, the predictable life, faded into insignificance as she stood there, caught in the gaze of the man who would soon claim her heart in ways she never imagined. Little did Lily know, this was only the beginning. The Mafia boss had noticed her, truly noticed her, and once Damien Moretti set his sights on someone, nothing, not circumstance, not fear, not reason, could prevent him from making them his. That ordinary Friday afternoon had become extraordinary, a turning point that would lead to danger, desire, and a bond neither of them could escape. She had come for sugar. But now, she belonged to him. The moment Lily stepped out of Damien's mansion, she could still feel the intensity of his gaze lingering on her, as if a part of him had followed her back into her quiet little home. Her hands trembled slightly, the sugar she carried now feeling heavier than it should, a tangible reminder that her life had just taken a dramatic turn. She tried to shake it off, telling herself it was just a brief encounter, a fluke, a fleeting moment with the notorious Mafia boss she had only ever heard about in whispers, but deep down, she knew it was far more than that. Her mind replayed every detail. The way he had looked at her, the slight smirk on his lips, the commanding yet strangely gentle tone of his voice. It was intoxicating, a mixture of fear and fascination she had never experienced before. By the time she reached her door, the sun had started to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, but Lily barely noticed. She locked herself inside, pacing the small living room as her heart continued to race. There was something undeniable about Damien, something magnetic, something that made her pulse quicken without her permission. She tried to focus on mundane tasks, organizing her shelves, preparing dinner, even scrolling through her phone, but every thought kept drifting back to that mansion, to the man who had unwittingly invaded her life with a simple knock. Later that evening, just as Lily was settling into bed, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number flashed across the screen. "I hope the sugar was sweet, Lily. I'll see you again soon." Her heart skipped a beat. She froze, staring at the message, a mixture of excitement and fear coursing through her veins. How did he know her name? Who else could it be but Damien Moretti? She didn't reply immediately, fearing that any reaction might somehow pull her deeper into his world before she was ready, but the thrill of the unknown was irresistible. Sleep came fitfully that night, filled with dreams of dark eyes, commanding presence, and an inexplicable pull that seemed to tether her heart to his. The next morning, Lily awoke to the faint knock of her neighbor's dog barking, but more surprisingly, there was another knock, this one firm and deliberate at her own door. Heart hammering, she peeked through the peephole and nearly dropped the milk she had just poured. There he was. Damien Moretti, standing with a calm smile, looking every bit as imposing and mesmerizing as before. She opened the door, and he stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his presence filling the small apartment, leaving her breathless. "I thought you might need a little more than sugar today," he said casually, though the intensity in his eyes contradicted the ease of his words. Lily found herself tongue-tied, unsure whether to welcome him or send him away. Before she could decide, he leaned against the counter, observing her with the same penetrating gaze that had haunted her thoughts since yesterday. The air between them was electric, charged with unspoken tension and an invisible connection that neither could deny. Damien moved around her apartment as if it were his own, touching objects casually, reading her expressions, and commenting on small details she had never thought anyone would notice. It was unsettling yet thrilling, and Lily couldn't help but be drawn into his orbit, her mind and body responding in ways she didn't fully understand. They talked for hours, Damien guiding the conversation with a subtle dominance, and Lily, despite herself, found herself revealing things she had never shared with anyone. Her fears, her dreams, her small everyday struggles, all laid bare before a man whose world was nothing like hers, yet who made her feel inexplicably safe. And as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the room, Damien finally moved closer, closing the distance between them. "You're different," he murmured, his voice low, almost a growl, sending shivers down her spine. "Most people don't see me for what I am, or for what I want." Lily's breath caught in her throat. "And what do you want?" she whispered, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. Damien's gaze softened for just a moment, enough to make her heart ache with a longing she didn't fully understand. "You," he said simply, as if that explained everything. Her mind screamed with warnings, the practical part of her pleading to step back, to not fall into the dangerous allure of a mafia boss, but another part, the part that had been captivated since the first knock, felt a pull so strong it was impossible to resist. Days passed, and Damien's presence became a constant in her life. Sometimes he appeared at her door with no warning, other times she would receive messages or small gestures that reminded her of him. Flowers, notes, small acts of attention that bordered on obsession, yet never crossed the line into fear, at least not fully. Lily found herself thinking of him constantly, craving his approval, his attention, and the warmth that seemed to follow him wherever he went. Yet with each encounter, she also discovered the shadows lurking beneath his charm, the stories of his past, the dangers of his business, the people who would do anything to harm him, and by extension, anyone he cared about. Damien was a storm, a mix of desire and danger, and Lily was increasingly aware that stepping into his world meant stepping into chaos. And still, she couldn't turn away. One evening, as rain poured outside and the city lights shimmered against the wet streets, Damien invited her to his mansion again, not as a visitor, but as someone he wanted by his side. Lily hesitated, heart pounding, but the pull was too strong. Inside, he led her to a private study, walls lined with books, artifacts, and subtle reminders of his power. He poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to her, and for the first time, they sat not as mafia boss and neighbor, but as 2 people connecting on a deeper, more personal level. The conversation was softer this time, personal yet guarded, full of laughter, curiosity, and an intimacy that surprised them both. Lily felt herself slipping further into his world, the lines between fear and fascination blurring with every word, every glance, every brush of their hands. And then, as if sensing her hesitation, Damien leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You should know, Lily, once someone enters my life, there's no turning back. You came for sugar, but now, you belong here, with me." Her heart raced uncontrollably. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and undeniable. That night, as she left his mansion, drenched in rain and anticipation, Lily realized the truth, her life had changed forever. The ordinary girl who had knocked on a door for sugar was now irrevocably tied to the most dangerous, captivating man she had ever met. And Damien, the mafia boss with a shadowed past and a powerful presence, knew it too. There was no turning back, no pretending, and no escape from the connection that had ignited the moment she first crossed that threshold. She belonged to him, whether she wanted to admit it or not, and the world she had known before had vanished behind the black doors of his mansion, leaving only the thrill, the danger, and the intoxicating allure of Damien Moretti. The days that followed became a whirlwind for Lily, a blur of stolen glances, unexpected visits, and the overwhelming sensation that her life had shifted into an entirely different dimension. Damien had a way of making every ordinary moment feel charged with meaning, whether it was a simple walk down the street or a casual conversation over coffee. Lily noticed how people around them seemed to instinctively give him space, a mixture of fear and respect hanging in the air wherever he went. Yet when he was with her, the intimidating aura softened just enough to reveal glimpses of the man beneath the ruthless exterior, a man capable of warmth, humor, and unspoken loyalty. Damien, for his part, watched her with a fascination that was almost tangible. Every small gesture, every word, every nervous laugh she offered became a puzzle piece he was intent on understanding. He had dealt with manipulation, betrayal, and power struggles his entire life, but Lily was different, genuine, unguarded, and strikingly unafraid to stand her ground in subtle ways that intrigued him more than she could imagine. One rainy evening, he arrived at her apartment unannounced, the city lights reflecting off the wet streets behind him, making him look larger than life. Lily opened the door, drenched in anxiety and anticipation, her heart racing in a way that seemed both frightening and exhilarating. Damien stepped inside without waiting for permission, as was his habit, and immediately began a casual conversation that belied the tension simmering beneath the surface. He asked about her day, her work, her neighbors, and somehow managed to make her feel like the most important person in the world, despite the dangerous undertones of his presence. As the rain tapped against the windows, creating a rhythmic background to their conversation, Lily felt a pull toward him that was impossible to resist. She realized she was no longer just visiting the Mafia Boss's world, she was living inside it, each moment blurring the line between fear and desire. Days turned into weeks, and Damien's influence in her life became more pronounced. He appeared at her door with flowers, with gifts that were small but thoughtful, with gestures that spoke louder than words. He never forced himself upon her, yet his presence demanded attention, respect, and an unspoken acknowledgement that she was no longer free in the way she had been before. Friends and neighbors noticed the change in her too. The quiet, cautious girl had begun to carry herself differently, with a confidence that was subtle but unmistakable. And yet, beneath the surface, there were moments of doubt and fear. Damien's world was dangerous, filled with shadows that Lily had only glimpsed in fragments. Stories of rivals, threats, and the consequences of crossing him were never far from her mind, yet the pull toward him was irresistible. One evening, Damien invited her to join him at a charity gala, a world of elegance and power she had never experienced. She hesitated, anxiety knotting her stomach, but curiosity and the magnetic pull of his world won over. As they arrived, the opulent chandeliers, glittering gowns, and quiet murmur of influential voices made her feel both out of place and enthralled. Damien, ever attentive, guided her through the crowd with an ease that was enviable, introducing her to people she had only seen in magazines or news articles, all while keeping a protective arm subtly around her waist. Throughout the night, Lily noticed the way people deferred to him, the slight lowering of voices when his gaze landed on a room, and the quiet but unmistakable aura of authority he carried effortlessly. And yet, despite all the power and danger, when he looked at her, Damien's eyes softened in a way that made the world around them fade. She felt seen, valued, and desired in a manner she had never known, and the mixture of fear and fascination made her pulse quicken. After the gala, Damien insisted on driving her home, the city streets slick with rain, lights reflecting off the asphalt in shimmering colors. The car ride was quiet, each lost in their thoughts, but the tension was palpable. Damien's hand brushed hers accidentally, and the contact was electric, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between them. When they arrived at her apartment, she hesitated at the door, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. He stepped closer, his presence enveloping her, and in a voice that was soft yet commanding, he said, "I want you to understand, Lily, that stepping into my world isn't just about glamour or charm. It's about loyalty, trust, and knowing that once I care, there's no going back." Her chest tightened, the gravity of his words sinking in. She had already stepped into his world, perhaps more deeply than she realized, and the pull toward him was undeniable. Over the following days, their interactions became even more intense. Damien's visits were frequent, sometimes sudden, yet always with a sense of purpose. He challenged her, teased her, and slowly unraveled layers of her personality that even she had been unaware existed. Lily found herself thinking of him constantly, replaying moments, words, and glances in her mind, each memory embedding itself more firmly into her heart. Yet, amid the growing closeness, there was tension, rival factions, whispers of betrayal, and subtle threats from Damien's enemies reminded her that this world, though intoxicating, was fraught with danger. Damien, aware of the risks, became more protective, his behavior a mixture of tender attention and controlled dominance. He made it clear that she was his, in ways both spoken and unspoken, yet he also respected her boundaries, understanding that fear and trust had to coexist delicately. One evening, as they spent time in the quiet of her apartment, Damien shared fragments of his past, stories of loss, survival, and the burdens of power. Lily listened, captivated and empathetic, realizing that beneath the dangerous exterior lay a man shaped by pain, responsibility, and an unyielding code. And in those moments, she felt a deeper connection, a pull that went beyond fascination or fear. It was the beginnings of trust, intimacy, and something she couldn't yet name. Days turned into nights, and nights into a cycle of growing tension, attraction, and subtle revelations. Lily began to see herself not just as a visitor in Damien's world, but as someone indispensable to him. The realization was thrilling and terrifying. She was in too deep, and yet, she knew there was no desire to turn back. Every glance, every word, every subtle touch deepened the bond between them, creating a connection that neither could deny. And so, the ordinary girl who had knocked on a mafia boss's door for sugar found herself enmeshed in a life of danger, desire, and an all-consuming attraction that promised to change her forever. Damien Moretti had claimed more than just her attention. He had claimed her heart, her curiosity, and, in ways both subtle and profound, her loyalty. And as Lily navigated this new, thrilling, and perilous existence, one truth remained undeniable. She belonged to him, wholly and irrevocably, and there was no turning back from the storm that was Damien Moretti. The bond between Lily and Damien grew stronger with each passing day, yet with it came a tension that neither of them could fully ignore. Damien's world was not just about power and influence, it was a constant web of danger, with enemies lurking in shadows, waiting for the slightest misstep. Lily had begun to understand that being with him meant walking a line between fascination and fear, between desire and risk. She found herself thinking about him constantly, her mind replaying every glance, every word, every fleeting touch, and with each memory, she felt herself drawn deeper into his orbit. Damien, in turn, seemed equally captivated, his gaze often lingering longer than necessary, his expressions revealing flashes of vulnerability that contrasted sharply with the ruthless reputation he carried. One evening, Damien invited Lily to his private estate on the outskirts of the city. The mansion was even more imposing than his downtown residence, surrounded by high walls, guarded gates, and sprawling gardens that glimmered under the soft light of lanterns. As they entered, the atmosphere was tense yet intimate, a mixture of elegance and quiet dominance that reflected Damien's dual nature, dangerous yet irresistibly magnetic. He guided her through the corridors, explaining subtle details of the estate, the security measures, and even the family heirlooms displayed throughout. Lily was captivated not just by the beauty of the place but by the meticulous control Damien exhibited over every aspect of his life. It was clear that everything here had a purpose, much like Damien himself. That night, they dined in a private room, away from the public eye, where conversation flowed more naturally than ever before. Damien spoke of his childhood, of lessons learned in harsh circumstances, of trust gained and lost, and of the rare people who had earned his respect. Lily listened intently, realizing that beneath the aura of power and fear lay a man who had experienced loss and struggle just like anyone else, yet had channeled it into a relentless drive that made him both formidable and compelling. As dinner progressed, the subtle tension between them thickened. Damien's eyes often lingered on her face, noting the way her eyes widened in curiosity or the slight nervous smile she wore when he teased her gently. Lily, caught in the intensity of his attention, felt her heart beat faster, realizing that every moment with him was a delicate dance of attraction and restraint. Later, Damien led her to the terrace, where the night sky stretched endlessly above, stars twinkling like scattered diamonds. The city lights shimmered below, casting soft reflections on the water features of the estate gardens. He handed her a glass of wine, and they stood in comfortable silence, each absorbing the presence of the other, the air thick with unspoken thoughts and emotions. Damien's hand brushed against hers, a subtle yet deliberate touch that sent a thrill through her body. "Lily," he said quietly, his voice low and filled with intensity, "you've changed things for me in ways I didn't expect. I thought I was untouchable, controlled, immune to distraction, and yet, here you are." She looked into his eyes, searching for the meaning behind his words. "And what do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, betraying the excitement and fear swirling within her. Damien's gaze softened, yet the intensity remained. "You've made me care. Truly care. And that's dangerous, for both of us." Her heart ached with a mixture of exhilaration and worry. She knew the truth in his words: the world he inhabited was treacherous, and the deeper her feelings grew, the greater the risk she faced. And yet, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. Every instinct told her to be cautious, but her heart had already crossed the line, tethered to Damien in ways she didn't fully understand. That night, as they returned to the main house, Damien's behavior shifted subtly. He became more protective, more attentive, yet never overbearing. He ensured she was comfortable, checked that she was safe, and maintained a presence that was simultaneously reassuring and intimidating. Lily began to see the complexities of his life, not just the danger, but the weight of responsibility, the unspoken codes he lived by, and the loyalty he demanded from those in his inner circle. She realized that being with Damien was not simply about passion or attraction, it was about navigating a world that required vigilance, trust, and an understanding of power dynamics she had never experienced before. Days turned into weeks, and their connection deepened further. Damien continued to integrate her into his life, introducing her to trusted associates, involving her in subtle decisions, and ensuring she felt included in a world that often operated on secrecy and influence. Lily adapted quickly, learning to anticipate his moods, understanding the subtleties of his language, and becoming attuned to the unspoken rules that governed his world. One evening, as Lily sat in his study reviewing documents for a charitable foundation he supported, Damien entered quietly, watching her with an intensity that made her heart flutter. "You've adapted well," he said, voice low, carrying both approval and a hint of surprise. "Better than I expected." She smiled faintly, feeling a sense of pride and belonging she had never felt before. "I want to understand your world," she admitted softly. "If I'm going to be part of it, I need to know what it means." Damien's expression softened further, a rare vulnerability breaking through his composed exterior. "And that's why I trust you," he said simply. "Most people wouldn't even try. Most would run at the first hint of danger. But you face it. Not recklessly, but deliberately. That's rare." Lily's chest swelled with emotion. To hear such words from Damien, a man who rarely allowed anyone close, filled her with a mixture of pride, love, and awe. She realized that in his world, trust was everything, and she had earned it. Yet, alongside the growing intimacy, there remained subtle reminders of the stakes involved. Damien's enemies did not rest. Threats arrived in whispers, some indirect, others more overt, always a reminder that the life she had stepped into was fraught with danger. And Damien, aware of every detail, never let her forget the reality. He was protective, yes, but firm. He made it clear that anyone who posed a threat would be met with consequences she could scarcely imagine. Despite the danger, Lily felt safe with him in a way that defied logic. She understood that his world was treacherous, yet being near him brought a thrill and sense of belonging that made the risks worth it. One evening, Damien took her to a secluded part of the estate garden, the moonlight reflecting off a small fountain. He held her close, their faces inches apart, and whispered, "You belong to me now, Lily. Not just in heart, but in trust, in loyalty, in everything that matters." Her pulse raced, every nerve alight with desire, fear, and exhilaration. She nodded, knowing she could never turn back, that her life had irrevocably intertwined with his. And in that moment, under the moonlit sky, surrounded by the quiet whispers of the estate, Lily accepted the truth: she was his, entirely and completely, and the ordinary life she had once known was gone forever. Damien Moretti had claimed not only her presence but her heart, her loyalty, and her destiny, and she would follow him into whatever storms lay ahead, knowing that together, nothing could break the bond they had forged. The weeks that followed brought a rhythm to Lily's life she had never anticipated, a delicate balance between ordinary existence and the extraordinary world Damien had pulled her into. Every day carried an undercurrent of tension and thrill, a mixture of danger and desire that made her pulse race in ways she hadn't known possible. Damien was ever present, a force that she couldn't escape, yet one she didn't want to. He was meticulous, protective, and at times, overwhelming, yet every glance, every subtle gesture, reminded her of the depth of his feelings and the gravity of the world she now inhabited. One evening, as autumn winds rustled the trees outside, Damien invited her to accompany him on a trip to one of his business properties outside the city. Lily hesitated, aware that venturing deeper into his world meant stepping further into uncertainty, yet curiosity and the magnetic pull of Damien's presence won over. They drove through winding roads, the cityscape gradually giving way to rolling hills and isolated estates. Damien remained silent for much of the journey, his focus on the road and the environment around them, but the subtle tension between them was palpable. Lily felt it in the way his hand occasionally brushed hers on the gearshift, in the protective way he scanned the surroundings, and in the occasional flicker of a smile when he caught her glancing at him. The property was vast, a combination of modern architecture and natural beauty, surrounded by trees that rustled in the cool evening breeze. Damien walked her through the grounds, explaining aspects of the business and the careful security measures in place. Lily listened, absorbing the information, but she was acutely aware of the intensity in Damien's presence, the way he moved with calculated precision, the way his eyes constantly evaluated everything in sight. That night, as they settled into one of the estate's guest quarters, Damien's demeanor softened in private, revealing glimpses of the man beneath the commanding exterior. He poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to her, his fingers brushing hers just long enough to ignite a spark of electricity. "You adapt quickly," he said quietly, almost as if testing her resolve. "Most people can't handle even a fraction of what you've seen in the past weeks, yet you navigated with poise and courage." Lily felt a surge of pride and vulnerability at his words. I want to understand," she admitted softly. "If I'm to be part of your world, I need to know what it means, fully." Damien's gaze softened, yet there remained an intensity that spoke of his power, his control, and the depth of his emotions. "And that is why I trust you," he said, almost reverently. "Not many could face this life and not falter. Not many would willingly step into the storm." The night deepened around them, shadows dancing on the walls from the flickering fireplace. Lily found herself drawn closer, the warmth of Damien's presence enveloping her in ways that were both comforting and intoxicating. They spoke of dreams, of hopes, and of the rare moments of light that punctuated Damien's otherwise dark existence. Lily realized that beneath the aura of danger and authority, Damien was a man shaped by experiences that demanded strength, resilience, and a careful balance between trust and caution. She felt privileged to witness these glimpses, to see the man behind the reputation, and the connection between them deepen further. Days turned into nights filled with quiet conversation, laughter, and subtle touches that spoke louder than words. Yet the danger of Damien's world never fully receded. Messages arrived discreetly, subtle warnings that reminded Lily that the life she now led was fraught with peril. Damien, ever vigilant, handled the threats with precision and authority, ensuring her safety while also teaching her to understand the stakes involved. Lily began to adapt, learning to read the nuances of his world, to recognize potential threats, and to navigate situations with a mixture of caution and courage. The partnership between them grew stronger, not just in the realm of attraction and trust, but in understanding, respect, and shared experiences that neither could ignore. One evening, as they returned to the city, Damien took Lily to a rooftop overlooking the skyline. The lights of the city stretched endlessly, a vast canvas of color and life. He held her close, the cool night air brushing against their skin, and whispered, "You've become part of me, Lily. Not just in presence, but in thought, in trust, and in heart. This is irreversible." Her chest tightened at the weight of his words. She knew the truth in them. Once she had entered Damien's world, there was no turning back, no retreating to the life she had known. She had become intertwined with him, with his power, his desires, and his dangerous existence, and the thought of separation felt both impossible and unimaginable. Over the following days, the intensity between them continued to build. Damien's attention was unwavering, his actions protective yet charged with an undercurrent of dominance that Lily found both thrilling and comforting. She noticed the way his eyes softened when she laughed, the subtle pride in his expression when she demonstrated understanding or courage, and the quiet possessiveness that spoke volumes without a single word being uttered. Yet there were moments of vulnerability too, fleeting glimpses of the man behind the reputation, revealing depth, empathy, and a longing for connection that only she seemed to understand. Lily realized that this dynamic, this intricate balance of danger, desire, trust, and intimacy, was reshaping her entirely. She was no longer the ordinary girl who had knocked on a door for sugar, she was a woman navigating a world of power, influence, and emotions that demanded courage she hadn't known she possessed. And Damien was no longer just a figure of intrigue or fear, he was the anchor, the storm, and the undeniable force that commanded her heart. One afternoon, as they returned from a brief trip to one of Damien's properties, Lily noticed subtle changes in his demeanor, sharpness in his gaze, a tighter set to his jaw, and a heightened awareness of their surroundings. She realized that even in moments of calm, the world Damien inhabited was never far from him. Yet, despite the constant tension, there was a comfort in their shared presence. They had established an unspoken rhythm, a connection that allowed them to navigate the uncertainties together, with trust, loyalty, and an intimacy that was as profound as it was exhilarating. That night, as they sat together in the quiet of her apartment, Damien placed his hand gently over hers. "This is just the beginning, Lily," he said quietly, his voice filled with a mix of certainty and promise. "You've entered a life few can comprehend, a world of danger and desire. But I promise you, every step we take, you will never be alone." Lily's heart swelled at his words. She understood the gravity of what he was saying, the depth of his commitment, and the intensity of the path she had willingly chosen. And in that moment, as they sat together in the dim light, she realized that her life had irrevocably changed. She belonged to Damien, not just in proximity, but in heart, mind, and spirit. The ordinary girl who had knocked on the Mafia Boss's door for sugar was gone, replaced by a woman entwined in a world of power, passion, and unwavering loyalty. And Damien was hers, as much as she was his, bound by an invisible thread that neither fear nor circumstance could sever. The weeks that followed were a careful dance between passion, trust, and the ever-present shadow of danger that Damien's world carried with it. Lily had grown more comfortable in his presence, yet she remained acutely aware of the risks she had willingly stepped into. Every time she saw him, every time his gaze lingered on her, she felt the thrill of being wanted, protected, and simultaneously exposed to the unpredictable currents of his life. Damien had a way of making even mundane moments feel charged with tension, whether it was a shared cup of coffee in the quiet of the morning or the subtle brush of their hands as they moved through the bustling streets of the city. One afternoon, Damien suggested they take a drive outside the city, to a secluded vineyard he owned. The journey itself was quiet, the hum of the car blending with the soft music playing in the background, but the tension between them was palpable. Lily could sense the weight of his presence, the careful attention he paid to the road and their surroundings, and the occasional flicker of a smile when she dared to meet his gaze. The vineyard was a sprawling expanse of green, rolling hills dotted with grapevines that swayed gently in the autumn breeze. Damien walked her through the property, explaining the cultivation process, the harvest schedules, and the subtle complexities of running such an enterprise. Lily listened attentively, impressed not only by the scale of his holdings but by the meticulous care he took in every detail. As they stood at the edge of a hill overlooking the property, Damien turned to her, his expression unreadable yet intense. "Lily," he began, his voice low and measured, "you've changed everything for me. I've spent years building walls, guarding my heart, and controlling every aspect of my world, and yet you've found your way past every barrier without even trying." Her heart raced, a mixture of exhilaration and apprehension coursing through her veins. She had always known Damien was formidable, a man whose presence commanded respect and caution, yet beneath that formidable exterior, there existed a vulnerability she had never anticipated. I don't understand how I did that," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Damien smiled faintly, a rare softness flickering across his features. "It's not about doing, Lily. It's about being. You've shown me something I didn't think I could feel, trust, openness, and the courage to let someone in without fear. That is rare, and it changes everything." They spent the afternoon wandering through the vineyard, talking quietly, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes, and even the moments of regret that had shaped them. Damien's attentiveness to her words, the way he listened without judgment, and the subtle encouragement he offered created a connection that was profound, intimate, and increasingly undeniable. As evening approached, the sky painted in shades of purple and gold, Damien led Lily to a small terrace overlooking the vineyard. A soft breeze carried the scent of grapes and earth, mingling with the crispness of the air. He handed her a glass of wine, their fingers brushing ever so slightly, and in that small touch, the intensity between them escalated. "Lily," he said quietly, his eyes locking with hers, "I want you to understand the gravity of what you've stepped into. My world is not simple. It is dangerous, demanding, and unyielding. But with you, I feel something I haven't felt in years. I feel alive, vulnerable, and entirely unguarded. Her chest tightened at his words. She understood that with every step closer to him, the stakes increased. Yet the thought of retreating never crossed her mind. The pull she felt toward him was too strong, the connection too profound. That night, as they returned to the city, the drive was quiet, the only sounds the soft hum of the engine and the occasional sighs that carried unspoken thoughts. Lily could feel Damien's gaze on her intermittently, a constant reminder of his presence, his attention, and the unrelenting force of his personality that had become a central part of her life. Days turned into nights, and their bond continued to deepen. Damien became more protective, ensuring that her interactions with the outside world were carefully managed, that her safety was always paramount, yet he never restricted her freedom. It was a delicate balance, one that Lily learned to navigate with increasing confidence. She found herself becoming more attuned to his moods, understanding the subtle cues that indicated caution or reassurance, and even beginning to anticipate his needs before he expressed them. Their interactions were no longer just about attraction, they were about understanding, partnership, and a shared commitment to each other's well-being. One evening, Damien invited Lily to a private dinner at his downtown residence. The setting was intimate, with soft candlelight casting gentle shadows across the room. They talked, laughed, and shared moments of silence that were charged with unspoken words. Damien's hand occasionally brushed hers across the table, each touch sending a ripple of electricity through her body. She realized that the intensity of their connection was growing, the pull between them becoming impossible to ignore. As the night deepened, Damien led her to the terrace, where the city lights glittered like a sea of stars below. He held her close, their foreheads touching, and whispered, "You are mine, Lily." Not just in presence, but in heart, in trust, and in spirit. And nothing will ever change that. Her breath caught in her throat. The certainty in his voice, the depth of his emotion, and the overwhelming intensity of his presence left her feeling both exhilarated and humbled. She knew the truth in his words. There was no turning back from the path they had embarked on together. Over the next few weeks, their lives became a carefully choreographed balance of passion, trust, and vigilance. Damien's enemies continued to lurk in the shadows, subtle threats that reminded Lily that the world she had entered was not one of ordinary danger. Yet, despite the risks, the moments of intimacy, laughter, and shared vulnerability solidified their bond. Lily had grown into a woman who could navigate Damien's world with courage, insight, and a deep understanding of the stakes involved. And Damien, in turn, had revealed layers of his personality that were reserved for those rare few who earned his trust and loyalty. Their relationship had become a mixture of intensity and tenderness, of dominance and trust, of danger and intimacy. Each day brought new challenges, but also new moments of connection that neither of them could ignore. And through it all, one truth remained undeniable: Lily had become an inseparable part of Damien's world, his thoughts, and his heart, just as he had become hers. The ordinary girl who had once knocked on a door for sugar was now entwined in a life of power, passion, and unwavering loyalty. And Damien had claimed her entirely, in ways that transcended mere attraction, forging a bond that neither danger nor circumstance could ever sever. The relationship between Lily and Damien had grown into something neither of them could have anticipated when she had first knocked on his door for sugar. Every day was a careful negotiation of desire, trust, and danger, a delicate balance that demanded both courage and intuition. Lily had become adept at reading Damien's subtle cues, the tightening of his jaw, the way his eyes scanned a room, the brief pause before he spoke, all signals that something was weighing on him, whether it was a business matter or a threat from someone lurking in the shadows. Despite the constant tension, she had never felt safer, more alive, or more certain of her place in the world than she did when she was with him. Damien, for his part, had become increasingly open with her, sharing fragments of his life, experiences, and vulnerabilities that few, if any, had ever witnessed. She had learned about the losses that shaped him, the betrayals that hardened him, and the rare moments of joy that he allowed himself in private. With every revelation, Lily felt the bond between them deepen, the invisible thread tying their fates together growing stronger with each passing day. One chilly evening, Damien invited her to his private estate once more, a secluded location that offered both privacy and security. The mansion glimmered under the moonlight, its imposing walls softened by the warm glow of lights and the gentle sway of trees in the night breeze. They walked through the expansive gardens, their hands occasionally brushing in a subtle yet electric connection that neither of them could ignore. Damien spoke softly, almost reverently, about the importance of trust, loyalty, and understanding in his life. Everything I do, every move I make, he said quietly, is calculated to protect what matters most. And you matter more than anything, Lily. Her heart ached at the weight of his words, the mixture of tenderness and authority sending shivers through her. She understood that in Damien's world, affection was measured in protection, in attentiveness, in the subtle ways he ensured her safety and well-being. They spent the evening exploring the estate, talking quietly, laughing softly, and occasionally sharing moments of comfortable silence. The connection between them was tangible, a magnetic force that neither distance nor circumstance could diminish. As the night deepened, Damien led her to a private terrace overlooking the estate's vineyards, the moon casting a silver glow over the rolling hills. He poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to her, his fingers brushing hers with deliberate intimacy. "You've changed me, Lily," he admitted, his voice low and filled with sincerity. "I thought I was untouchable, unmovable. I thought no one could penetrate the walls I've built around myself. And yet, here you are, and I can't imagine a world without you in it." She felt her pulse quicken, the mixture of desire and admiration for the man before her almost overwhelming. It was one thing to be drawn to him, but another entirely to witness the vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to see. She realized that the intensity of their connection was not just physical or emotional, it was spiritual, a bond forged in trust, risk, and mutual understanding. Over the following days, Damien's protective instincts became even more pronounced. He monitored the threats that occasionally surfaced in his world, subtle yet dangerous reminders that the life Lily had stepped into was fraught with peril. Despite the constant presence of danger, Damien ensured that she felt safe, that her confidence grew, and that their shared moments were filled with both passion and reassurance. Lily, in turn, had become more attuned to his world, anticipating his needs, understanding the nuances of his interactions, and even contributing in ways that strengthened their partnership. Their evenings were often spent in quiet intimacy, whether sharing a meal, sitting together by the fire, or simply holding each other in silence. Every touch, every glance, every whispered word reinforced the depth of their bond, the magnetic pull between them, and the certainty that they were irrevocably connected. One afternoon, as they returned from a business-related meeting in the city, Damien took Lily to a secluded rooftop garden overlooking the skyline. The city lights shimmered below, reflecting off the glass buildings and casting a gentle glow over the terrace. He held her close, their foreheads touching, and whispered, "You are mine, Lily." Not just in proximity, but in trust, in heart, and in spirit. And nothing, no danger, no circumstance, can ever change that. Her breath caught at the certainty in his voice, the depth of emotion he conveyed, and the intensity of the moment. She knew that he spoke the truth, that their lives were now intertwined in ways that could not be undone. Days turned into nights filled with shared responsibilities, laughter, quiet moments of reflection, and subtle yet intense passion. Damien's world was demanding, yet in her presence, he allowed himself to be human, to show vulnerability, and to rely on someone outside his circle of power. Lily, in turn, had grown stronger, more confident, and more aware of her own capabilities within his world. One evening, as a soft rain fell outside, Damien and Lily found themselves alone in his private study. The rain pattered against the windows, creating a rhythmic backdrop to their conversation. Damien looked at her with an intensity that made her heart race, his eyes dark and captivating. "You've become indispensable," he said quietly. "Not just to me, but to everything I do. Your presence, your understanding, it changes how I navigate my world." Lily felt a mixture of pride and humility at his words. She realized that her journey from the ordinary girl who had knocked on his door for sugar to this woman standing beside a powerful mafia boss had been rapid, intense, and transformative. Their bond was not merely romantic, it was strategic, emotional, and spiritual, forged in the crucible of shared experiences, risk, and trust. As the night deepened, Damien drew her close, their lips meeting in a tender yet urgent kiss, a reaffirmation of their connection and commitment. Every touch, every gesture, every whispered word reinforced the truth that neither could exist fully without the other. And yet, amid the intimacy and connection, the constant presence of danger reminded them both that their world was never entirely safe. Messages arrived discreetly, subtle warnings and reminders of rivals, enemies, and the delicate balance of power Damien maintained. Yet, instead of fear, Lily felt a heightened awareness, a deepened sense of purpose, and an unwavering commitment to stand by him. They were partners in every sense, emotionally, strategically, and spiritually, and the bond they shared had become unbreakable. And so, as they sat together in the quiet of the study, listening to the rain and feeling the steady beat of each other's hearts, one truth became undeniable: Lily belonged to Damien, and Damien belonged to her. The ordinary life she had known was gone, replaced by a world of intensity, passion, loyalty, and danger. And in that world, there was only one certainty: together, they were unstoppable, bound by a connection that transcended fear, circumstance, and the ordinary constraints of life. The girl who had knocked on the Mafia boss's door for sugar had become so much more than that. She had become the center of his world, his anchor, and his undeniable desire. And Damien, the formidable, enigmatic, and dangerously captivating man she had come to love, had claimed her entirely, in heart, mind, and spirit, forging a bond that would endure through every challenge, every threat, and every storm that their intertwined lives would inevitably face. The days that followed were a testament to the bond between Lily and Damien, a connection forged in trust, desire, and shared challenges that neither could have anticipated when she had first knocked on his door for sugar. Their lives had become intricately intertwined, a delicate balance between intimacy, danger, and the unspoken understanding that each moment together carried weight beyond the ordinary. Damien's world was relentless, full of shadows, rivalries, and threats that demanded constant vigilance, yet in Lily's presence, he found a rare softness, a sense of grounding that allowed him to experience moments of genuine peace. Lily, for her part, had embraced this new life fully, adapting to the rhythms of Damien's world with courage and intuition she hadn't realized she possessed. The ordinary girl next door had become a woman who could navigate power, influence, and danger without losing herself, and in doing so, she had earned Damien's unwavering trust and devotion. One evening, Damien invited Lily to a private celebration in one of his secluded estates, a quiet, intimate event meant to honor a recent business achievement while keeping the details far from the prying eyes of the city. The estate was illuminated by soft lanterns, their golden glow reflecting off the meticulously maintained gardens, creating a serene and almost magical atmosphere. Damien led Lily through the grounds, his hand steadying hers as they walked, each step a subtle reminder of the connection they shared. The evening was filled with quiet conversation, laughter, and fleeting moments of tenderness, yet beneath the surface, both were aware of the fragility and intensity of the life they led. As the night progressed, they found themselves alone on a balcony overlooking the estate, the stars twinkling in the clear sky above and the distant city lights shimmering below. Damien turned to her, his expression a mixture of intensity, affection, and unspoken determination. "Lily," he began softly, his voice carrying over the gentle night breeze, "from the moment you knocked on my door, everything changed. I didn't expect to care, not like this. Not for anyone. And yet, here we are. You've become my anchor, my reason, and my indisputable truth." Her chest tightened at his words, a combination of awe, love, and the lingering awareness of the danger that surrounded them. She understood that this declaration was more than mere affection, it was a promise, a recognition of the bond they had forged, and the unyielding commitment that came with it. "Damien," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, I feel the same. I didn't expect any of this, but I can't imagine my life without you. Whatever comes, I want to face it with you." A faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips, one that was rare in its vulnerability. He reached for her hand, his thumb brushing over hers with deliberate gentleness. "Then it's settled," he murmured, a flicker of humor breaking through the gravity of the moment. "We face it together. No compromises, no regrets, just us." The quiet intensity of the night deepened their connection, each heartbeat a silent affirmation of the love and loyalty that had grown between them. In the following weeks, life continued to oscillate between the ordinary and the extraordinary. Damien's world remained as demanding and perilous as ever, with rivalries and subtle threats reminding them that their happiness was never guaranteed. Yet within that chaos, Lily and Damien cultivated a sanctuary, a space defined by trust, understanding, and the undeniable pull that had first brought them together. Their days were filled with careful navigation of business matters, social interactions, and the occasional adventure that allowed them moments of reprieve from the pressures surrounding them. And at night, they returned to each other, finding solace, intimacy, and affirmation in shared moments that were increasingly precious in a world that demanded constant vigilance. One evening, Damien surprised Lily with a quiet gesture, a simple dinner on the rooftop of his city residence, the skyline shimmering like a sea of light around them. The table was set modestly, the only embellishments being candles that flickered softly in the cool breeze. As they dined, Damien's gaze remained fixed on her, a mixture of admiration, desire, and quiet reverence in his eyes. "You've become everything I didn't know I needed," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I will never take that for granted. You've changed me, Lily, in ways no one else could." Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, not of sadness, but of profound gratitude and love. She had never imagined that a single knock on a door could lead to a life so intense, so passionate, and so irrevocably intertwined with someone as formidable and captivating as Damien Moretti. The night continued with quiet conversation, laughter, and moments of shared reflection. Damien spoke of the future, of his desire to protect and cherish her, and of the rare moments of peace and joy he found in her presence. Lily, in turn, shared her hopes, fears, and the deep sense of belonging she now felt, an anchor in a world that had once seemed chaotic and overwhelming. Over time, the threats surrounding Damien's life became less pronounced, not because they had disappeared, but because their unity had grown stronger, a force that few dared challenge. Lily's confidence and understanding of his world allowed them to navigate dangers with precision, intelligence, and a level of trust that was rare in his line of life. One quiet night, as they stood together on the balcony of his estate, Damien pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "You are mine, Lily. Not just in proximity, but in every conceivable way, heart, mind, and soul. And I will guard that fiercely, no matter the cost." Her heart ached with love, desire, and certainty. "And I am yours," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotions coursing through her. "Completely, irrevocably, and without hesitation." In that moment, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, the dangerous streets, rival factions, and the pressures of Damien's empire fading into the background. They had created a universe defined by trust, passion, and an unbreakable bond, one that no external force could sever. The girl who had knocked on the Mafia Boss's door for sugar had become the woman who stood beside him in love, loyalty, and partnership. And Damien Moretti, the enigmatic, powerful, and unrelentingly captivating man, had claimed her heart entirely, forging a bond that transcended fear, circumstance, and the ordinary constraints of life. Together, they had rewritten the rules of their worlds, combining strength with vulnerability, danger with desire, and power with unwavering trust. As the night deepened, Damien held her close, their bodies intertwined, hearts beating in sync, and souls connected by the invisible thread that had first drawn them together. Lily realized, with a clarity she had never known, that she belonged to him entirely, and he belonged to her. There were no more doubts, no hesitation, and no retreat. Their love, forged in risk, passion, and unspoken understanding, was unshakable, a testament to the extraordinary journey that had begun with a single, simple knock on a door. And so, in the quiet of the night, amidst the shimmering city lights and the protective embrace of the man she loved, Lily finally understood the depth of what had happened. She had entered a world of power, danger, and desire, and emerged not just unscathed, but profoundly changed. She was his, Damien's, entirely and irrevocably, and together, they would face whatever storms, challenges, or threats the future might hold. The ordinary girl next door had become extraordinary, and Damien had found, in her, a force as rare, captivating, and indomitable as himself. Their story, born of a simple knock and nurtured through trust, passion, and unwavering loyalty, had reached a point of unbreakable union, a love that would endure beyond circumstance, danger, and time itself.